of Manchaca United Methodist Church. I'm Pastor David McNinsky. I'm one of the pastors, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the service this evening, but also to extend an invitation on Facebook Live to join us at 8:30 or 11 o'clock on Sunday morning for our Easter celebration. Glad that you are here. Let us turn our hearts and minds as we remember what Christ has done for us. Let us turn our hearts and minds toward God.
While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. "Why this waste?" they asked. "This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor." Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over.
Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. Because of all of my enemies, I am the utter contempt of my neighbors and an object of dread to my closest friends. Those who see me on the street flee from me. I am forgotten, as though I were dead. I have become like broken pottery. For I hear many whispering terror on every side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life. But I trust in you, Lord. I say you are my God.
They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour is come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners."
The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands.' Yet even then, their testimony did not agree."
Very early in the morning, the chief priests, with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "You have said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. And so Pilate asked him again, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply. And Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man named Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one that you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate.
But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of the dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed.
After they mocked him, they took off the robe and put his clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. And as they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'"
So, you think you want to play chess with God? I wouldn't. Because the whole time you're playing, you think you're winning, only to find out that you've lost. Think about Pharaoh. Pharaoh has oppressed the people of Israel, and he's kept them from escaping. And then finally, when they are escaping, he has them trapped. They have the Red Sea in front of them, Pharaoh's army behind them, and he's moving in for the kill. Check! Only a little bit later, we see the remains of Pharaoh's army floating in the Red Sea. Or take Samson. Forces of evil take Samson. They cut his hair, he loses his strength. They poke his eyeballs out. They tie him to a pillar in the palace of the evil king. And there they mock him and taunt him because they have rendered the strong man powerless. Check. Only shortly thereafter, the former strong man, with what strength that remains in him, pushes against the columns of the palace and takes down the palace and everyone who is under its roof. Well, the Philistines, they're a pretty good army, pretty strong, but they're smart too. And they've worked out a pretty good deal. They've talked the Israelites into a man against man, mano a mano struggle. You send your champion, we'll send our champion. Now, our champion, of course, is huge, maybe 10 feet tall, and he's got a giant sword and strong armor. His name is Goliath. They think it's a pretty good plan. But the plan looks even better. When Israel's champion comes out, he's just a boy. He's maybe 12 years old. And he has no sword. He's got a slingshot. He has no armor. He's got nothing. The Philistines have them just where they want the Israelites. Check. Well, a little bit later, we find that big, heavy sword that Goliath is carrying. David has taken it and cut off the head of the dead giant. Or take the Assyrian ruler, strong, brilliant, and extremely merciless. His name was Sennacherib. And Sennacherib came into Israel and conquered town after town, village after village, till he got right to the gates of Jerusalem. And then he sent them a note and he said, look, your God has not protected you thus far. I've destroyed every town in my wake, and you're next, so just surrender. In fact, he said in the note, I think your God even wants me to win. He's got them surrounded. He's got them right where he wants them, with an army of hundreds of thousands surrounding Jerusalem. Check. Only later that night, after the king of Jerusalem has prayed, an angel of death comes through the Assyrian camp, and 185,000 soldiers meet their death. Well, then there was Daniel. Daniel and his friends captured by the Babylonians, but they refused to bow down to the Babylonian king, and so he devises a plan to torture them and kill them. He takes the three friends of Daniel and throws them into a fiery furnace. But just to add a little bit of excitement to it, because he's got them in a place where he can torture them and do whatever he wants, he turns up the heat of the furnace 7 times. So hot that even the people that put the 3 prisoners into the furnace are incinerated. They're gone. He's got these 3. They're going to be burned to a crisp. Check. And yet, when the smoke clears, the king looks back into the furnace and there are 3 men and they're not singed at all. Not a hair on their head burnt. And it appears that a figure like a 4th person is in the fire with them. Oh, and then there was Caesar. Caesar was the first person to say, I am Lord, and I am the only one who forgives sins. And to consolidate his empire and to keep people enslaved to him, he ordered an enrollment. All the world would be enrolled, and there's only one reason that you fill out an enrollment, that's so you can be taxed. So he could more heavily tax the Israelites. And 2 poor Israelites, Mary and Joseph, make their way from Nazareth to Bethlehem to register, to be taxed, to continue Caesar's reign of oppression. And so they make the long journey and they get ready to pay the taxes. Check. Only Mary and Joseph on this journey, we find out, to Bethlehem are actually fulfilling an ancient prophecy that says the one who will come and free the people must be born in Bethlehem. Well, and then we are where we are on Good Friday. the forces of sin, evil, and death, an amazing partnership between religious leaders, government officials, and citizens willing to turn their head and look the other way, has finally gotten this would-be Messiah captured. And they've got him on the cross. And it's better than that. They killed him on the cross. And they've placed him into the tomb. And they roll the stone over the tomb. That ought to do it. Check. But you know what? You ought not play chess with God. Because this game has just started when they roll the stone across the tomb. Do you remember the famous words of Admiral Akbar in the Star Wars movie? It's a trap! And it is a trap. The tomb becomes, in a sense, God's Trojan horse. Because you know what happens? In order to defeat death, Jesus must die. He must experience death and get inside death and wrestle it. And take all the venom out of death. And defang death. And to do it, he's got to die. He's got to get it from the inside. And he does. And to defeat the powers of sin and evil, he has to let them hurl their worst at him. He needs to let them throw at him everything they have. All the big guns right at him. And he takes it all to conquer them. You may remember the great boxer Muhammad Ali, maybe the greatest of all time, used to have a strategy called rope-a-dope. He would stand against the ropes and let his opponent just pummel him, pummel him, pummel him, pummel him, pummel him, pummel him, until finally they were exhausted. And at that moment then, Ali took charge. And he pummeled his opponent into submission. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's the Trojan horse. It's the rope-a-dope. This chess game isn't over until God says it's over. And then it is over. Do you know that between Good Friday and Easter Sunday in the church's calendar, what they did on Saturday is they would tell jokes and play tricks on each other? And they would do it because it was their way of saying, we tricked Satan. We tricked the forces of death and sin and evil. They thought they were winning. And all along they were playing right into the hands of God. So, sin, evil, death, illness, racism, poverty, I am putting you on notice. Don't play chess with God. It's not worth it. Don't go against him. You cannot win. Cancer? Looks bad. Check. Job loss? People lined up around the block for food? That's bad. Check. Relationship struggles? Cooped in a house together for 3 weeks, staying at home? Doesn't look great. Doesn't feel great. Check. COVID-19 bring the whole world to a standstill and scare everyone. Fear delights in that. Looks good for fear. Check. Because you know what? When you play chess with God, you need to remember this one thing. That God always gets the last move. And it's always the best and right move. On Friday, sin, evil, death, illness, oppression played their best move, and they got him in the tomb. Check. And patiently, God waited almost 3 days to make his next move and to respond. Checkmate. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last. Surely he was the Son of God.